The war they don't see. Two men, one region, and a secret war raging inside them. It isn't just missiles, it isn't just maps. This is a war for control, not of land, but of minds. On one side, Benjamin Netanyahu, holding up a map at the United Nations, smiling as he outlines a future Middle East built in his image. On the other, Iran's leadership, silent, brooding, buried under decades of betrayal, sanctions, and rage that runs so deep it burns through generations. But here's what almost no one says out loud. This is not just geopolitical warfare. This is psychological combat, a mind war. Every missile fired is a message. Every speech, a manipulation. Every silence, a signal of calculation. And right now, what's at stake is narrative domination. The ability to define who's right, who's wrong, and who gets to write history. Israel says, "We are reshaping the Middle East." Iran whispers back, "You can't erase centuries of resistance with a speech and a strike." But behind those words, behind the cameras, each leader is haunted. Haunted by the fear of irrelevance, of defeat, of failure. This is the psychology of legacy, of national ego, of fear dressed up as strategy. And the most chilling part, the people on the ground, are just the projection of a deeper mental war, playing out at the very top. Before the first shot was fired, before the first drone took flight, this war was already raging, in secret, in minds. And now, the mask is slipping. But what pushed Netanyahu to rush the map? Why is Iran acting like time is running out? And what does the Leviathan gas field have to do with mass psychological collapse? That's what we're about to uncover. Let's begin. What the mind behind the missile? He stood before the world, map in hand, declaring a new future. Netanyahu didn't just pitch a plan, he launched a psychological offensive. In September 2023, just weeks before the Hamas operation, Netanyahu addressed the UN. He raised a map, calm voice, firm tone, and unveiled the so-called New Middle East, a grand corridor stretching from India to Europe, with Israel as its spine. But what most didn't see was what the map really meant. It wasn't a map of hope, it was a mental claim of dominance. Behind the speech was fear. Fear of fading relevance, fear that BRICS, China's Silk Road, Iran's alliances would leave Israel surrounded and forgotten. So what did he do? He tried to draw over reality. This is what psychologists call projected control. When someone tries to overwrite chaos with vision. To the world, it looked like strategy. To a psychologist, it looked like a man trying to silence anxiety with a Sharpie. But that map wasn't just about vision. It was a warning. And what happened next would send shockwaves across every border. 2. Iran's invisible wounds. Iran didn't respond with words. It responded with scars. To understand Iran's behavior, you have to look past the politics into the psychology of a nation wounded again and again. They signed the nuclear deal in 2015, played by the rules, watched the West rip it apart. Then came sanctions, crippling, choking, personal. Every time Iran reached out, it got burned. Every time it tried diplomacy, it was humiliated. And here's the psychological twist. When betrayal becomes a pattern, people stop trusting words and start preparing for war. Iran's leadership began operating from what psychologists call defensive regression, a state where the past trauma becomes present logic. They don't react to what's happening now. They react to everything that's already happened. So when Netanyahu held up that map, Iran didn't see economic corridor. They saw encirclement. They saw a final attempt to bury them. That's why they built proxies. That's why they hardened their positions. Not because they wanted chaos, but because chaos was the only thing they weren't being lied to about. 3. Game beneath the sand. But this isn't just psychological, it's also economic warfare, masked in emotion. Beneath Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, there's gas, a lot of it. And in 2010, a discovery changed everything. The Leviathan gas field, huge, buried in the Leviathan basin, right in disputed waters off the coast of Palestine, Syria, Lebanon. And here's the catch. Every side knew what it meant. Control that gas, and you don't just have money, you have power, relevance, leverage. Israel watched Syria block Western extraction. Watch Lebanon resist drilling. Watch Gaza try to breathe under siege. So what did it do? Wipe the board. Ports got bombed. Syria's infrastructure collapsed. Gaza strangled. Beirut gone in an explosion, still shrouded in mystery. It's what psychologists call territorial annihilation. Not just to win, but to erase the other player's ability to even exist in the game. Now, only one port remains. Haifa, Israeli-controlled. And guess what? While bombs fell on Gaza in October 2023, Israel quietly handed out 12 gas extraction licenses for that basin. Not a coincidence. A move made in silence, while the world was screaming. 4. Mirror neurons in conflict. One side strikes, the other retaliates. One side escalates, the other doubles down. This isn't just strategy, it's psychological mirroring in its rawest form. Human beings are wired with mirror neurons. They help us understand others by subconsciously imitating them. It's how babies learn. It's how mobs form. And in war, it's how enemies lock themselves into a cycle of endless escalation. Every missile, every airstrike, every retaliatory drone, it's not just military, it's emotional mimicry. It's rage copying rage. Israel strikes Gaza. Iran arms Hezbollah. Hezbollah fires back. Israel bombards Damascus. Round and round, until neither side remembers who started it, only that they have to finish it. This is where Bandura's social learning theory explodes into real life. We learn aggression by watching it. We justify violence by seeing it returned. In the fog of war, moral lines blur until the mind doesn't see right or wrong, only threat and survival. But here's where it gets darker. Both Israel and Iran are not just reacting to each other, they're reacting to the ghosts behind each other, to history, to humiliation, to loss, to fear. What we're witnessing isn't just a political feud, it's generational trauma acting itself out in real time. Gaza becomes the screen, Lebanon the speaker, and Syria the graveyard of everyone's emotional baggage. This is war as projection, and the battlefield isn't just physical, it's inside every leader's nervous system. 5. Operation Rising Lion, strike first or fall apart. When does fear become action? When does the mind say, now or never? For Israel, that moment came in June 2025. They called it Operation Rising Lion, a preemptive strike so precise, so aggressive, it shocked even their closest allies. But this wasn't just military calculus. It was a national panic attack, weaponized. Iran had attacked Israel in April 2024 with drones, missiles, and raw audacity. It shattered illusions. For a moment, Israel didn't look like the region's dominant power. It looked vulnerable. And vulnerability, in the minds of nationalists, it's unforgivable. So Israel snapped. And that snap wasn't just policy. It was psychological reflex, a full-body flinch from a country that felt its legacy slipping. The airstrikes hit deep. Iranian nuclear sites, military infrastructure, top commanders, gone. But the message wasn't just tactical, it was existential. You will not erase us. This is textbook fight-or-flight response, but on a geopolitical scale. When people experience trauma repeatedly, they develop something called hypervigilance. Always scanning, always bracing. Israel wasn't planning war, it was bracing for it. And when the anticipation became too loud, they pulled the trigger. But here's the danger. In psychology, there's a phenomenon known as learned helplessness. When people, or nations, are punished no matter what they do, they eventually stop trying. They freeze, they submit, they implode. That's where Iran's proxies were headed. Hamas, crippled. Hezbollah, cornered. Syria, collapsed. The only one left standing was Yemen's Houthis, and even they were losing grip. Iran was alone, bleeding, fragmented, and isolation in psychological terms is the final break before a total collapse or a desperate lunge. So now, two minds are left in the ring, both battered, both afraid, both convinced that the next move will define their place in history. Six, BRICS, blocks, and the breakdown of balance. This war wasn't just regional. It was a scream echoing through global halls of power. And it wasn't about territory. It was about who controls the future and who's fading into the past. As Israel and Iran clashed, something bigger loomed in the background. The rise of BRICS, a global shift. China, Russia, Iran. Dozens of nations lining up to abandon the West's system. A new Silk Road spreading from Beijing to the Mediterranean. To the West, it wasn't just trade. It was a psychological collapse. The US watched its influence slide. Europe stood shivering without gas. And Israel? It saw its one-shot moment to rise by tearing others down. This is what Maslow's hierarchy of needs looks like in global politics. At the bottom, survival. At the top, legacy. Israel wasn't just fighting a regional enemy, it was fighting irrelevance. It had to deliver gas, had to prove dominance, had to be seen. Because being forgotten in a world realigning itself, that's worse than war. That's psychological death. So it moved fast, eliminated rivals, struck Iran, claimed ports, and all while the world watched BRICS rise, China expand, and the old empire slowly disintegrate. The mind war wasn't just between Iran and Israel anymore. It was spreading through trade deals, energy corridors, collapsing alliances, and desperate empires. The balance wasn't breaking because of bombs. It was breaking because no one knew who they were anymore. The US was no longer trusted. Russia was bleeding in Ukraine. Europe was cold and broke. And the Middle East, it was being ripped open by two powers clinging to memory, myth, and fear. 7. Rewriting the script of the Middle East. This wasn't just a war, it was a pen fight, each side trying to write the final chapter first. Iran wanted to be the gatekeeper of resistance. Israel wanted to be the architect of the future. But they weren't writing with ink. They were writing with blood. And both believed this chapter would define everything that came next. Netanyahu's strikes weren't just meant to cripple, they were meant to etch his name into history. This was legacy warfare. Psychologists call this the Ericksonian crisis of ego integrity versus despair. Near the end of life or reign, people either feel complete or terrified that their story means nothing. Netanyahu, he wasn't just making moves, he was chasing immortality, to go down as the one who tamed the region, to leave behind not just a state, but a story that would be told for 1,000 years. And Iran was spiraling. Its proxies were falling. Its ports were blocked. Its pride fractured. This is where Jung's archetypes rise from the shadows. Netanyahu cast himself as the warrior, disciplined, strategic, sacrificial, willing to carry the burden of violence for a promised peace. But Iran became the shadow, the hidden fear, the disowned truth, the part of the psyche everyone tries to destroy because it reminds them of their own darkness. And the Middle East? It became the page both sides were scribbling on, a battlefield of identity, ideology, and memory. Each airstrike was a sentence, each policy a paragraph, each corpse a punctuation mark no one would erase. And while these men played gods with pens and planes, the people caught in the middle, they were the ink. 8. The final mind war. Gaza, memory, and madness. It's not just bombs falling in Gaza, it's memory, it's history, it's madness, on repeat. The siege isn't only about territory, it's about erasing the psychological core of a people, cut off the ports, crush the infrastructure, block the coast. But behind all the tactics, there's one disturbing truth. This is a war against memory. Psychologists call it transgenerational trauma, the pain of one generation passed to the next, like a curse that never stops echoing. The children of Gaza don't just inherit land, they inherit nightmares. Every missile becomes a message. Forget who you are. Every blockade whispers, you have no future. But the paradox? The more you try to erase memory, the more powerful it becomes. Gaza isn't forgotten. It's engraved in the psyche of every Palestinian, in every exile, in every refugee, in every heart that still beats despite everything designed to crush it. Israel's actions, whatever the justification, have triggered something ancient, something primal. A repetition of the Nakba. 1948 all over again, but live, digital, and louder. And now, psychological defenses collapse. Even global audiences, numbed by years of headlines, begin to feel what psychologists call moral disengagement fatigue. People can't keep looking away. The horror starts leaking through. The story becomes too loud to silence. The mind starts to break. And within that break, truth creeps in. Not about who's right, not about who's stronger, but about who's losing their humanity to win a narrative. Because this isn't just about geopolitics anymore. It's about how far a mind will go to stay in control, even if it means destroying everything around it.